Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Throne of Steel episode number 180 based on novel. So let's start. It had lost track of Long Houchen and the young girl Cece, as a sticky light essence covered its body from all over. Not only did it give him a kind of slowed feeling, more alarmingly, its body's originally fiery red-colored radiance dimmed completely, and even its hairs, which should be reflecting dark gold light, had lost their color, leaving a sight of all black. Light's assimilation. All forces related to light would get sucked into the light god domain. Long Houchen's current display was a domain's most basic power, amplification and weakening. The divine sword in his hand was slowly raised. Now Long Houchen was attempting to see what boundary his domain's power could now reach. A soft multicolored light slowly came off from the united divine swords, a light full of aura of life, and, once in contact with Long Houchen's light god domain, immediately produced a chain reaction. Back in the temple's great gathering, Long Houchen's battle with Yang Haoyu had made use of an evolution of the light god domain. But at that time, he was totally pressured by the opponent, completely unable to exert control over his evolved domain. This time was not the same. Long Houchen was finding out with shock that this natural world full of aura of life was, after the evolution of his domain, causing its original intense gold color to disappear. All that was left was only a dim multicolored gloss, but that gloss was encompassing all the surrounding creatures. That was really a splendid feeling. All the vegetation, and even the sky and nature, all became extensions of his spiritual energy and emotional force. He controlled their very lives. Long Houchen's eyes shrank, and immediately, two trees that the nearing gorilla was approaching grew out, becoming multicolored. Their thick branches immediately engulfed that gorilla. While taking control over life, Long Houchen was in focusing deeply. This instant, he felt the bottleneck that had been limiting him getting split abruptly as the suppressed spiritual energy gushed out at once. The multicolored gold surrounding his body became even more intense and compacted in the process. Within the heart of eternity, the spiritual pellet, which was turned purplish gold by Haoyu's blood force, changed in the midst of the latter's throbbing, growing larger by threefold in just the blink of an eye. While cultivating one spiritual pellet, everyone would need different methods and encounter different limitations. But, without exception, a change in the spiritual pellet would always mean a qualitative rise. Right, in this world brimming with life, after his soul sublimation, Long Houchen had finally completed his breakthrough from the second rank, formally reaching the third rank of the ninth step. The domain's power instantly spread outwards, covering an area twice that which was occupied before his breakthrough. Controlling life, what a powerful ability that was! That gorilla had already shattered the two trees, but was completely bound by that multicolored golden light. Long Houchen had a dim smile on his face. Pointing his right hand to that gorilla, he immediately shot two multicolored light rays from his eyes, striking at that gorilla's eyes. The gorilla's body shook violently, as the surrounding multicolored light flocked toward his body. The gorilla's body kept shaking uninterruptedly, a gold-red light gushing out from its body in the meantime, rejecting the multicolored gold. However, it was just too weak compared to this post-evolution light god domain. Only a domain could stand in front of a domain. This gorilla's original strength should have been comparable to Powerhouse at the third rank of the ninth step, but its flaw lay in the lack of a domain's boost. Without such a support, it had no control over the exterior world, and in front of a domain-wielding Powerhouse, pure strength was not of too much use. The gorilla's struggle started to get weaker, and gradually, its body stopped shaking, as a look of terror gradually filled its eyes. Its massive body was shrunken gradually, starting from a small mountain size it got smaller and smaller. A short while later, the previously unprecedented gorilla was all of a sudden under 1 meter tall, looking like a mini, yet pretty, version. Right now, it had none of its previous ferocity and its eyes filled with an expression of loss along with a tinge of grievance. Right, this was the power of control over life. Long Houchen had directly turned it back to infancy. It had lost not only its age, but also its strength. Although this was a state that could only be maintained within Houchen's domain, it was enough in the course of a battle. What threat could there be in facing such a miniaturized little guy for Long Houchen? Houchen lifted his right arm, looking at the sword of life and creation, a trace of regret revealing itself on his face. This was because this divine sword, coming from the fusion of the aria of the goddess of light and blue rain, hibiscus of light, was gradually falling short of his cultivation, especially noticeable compared to the might displayed by the purplish gold Haoyu sword. He came to understand that although the sword of life and creation was a good weapon, it was in the end no genuine divine tool. In some meaning, it could only be considered a weapon of immortal grade at the nearest level to divine tool. But such a weapon was insufficient to sustain Long Houchen's future growth. This was also why he gave such importance to gaining the approval of the divine throne of eternity and creation. Going from second to third rank, and thoroughly completing his domain's first evolution, now he would no longer need to use the sword of life and creation as an intermediary to achieve that again. Even so, this was a pair of divine swords he would forever treasure, even if they should only be kept for collection in the future. A soft multicolored halation was emitted from the white-clad girl Cece at Long Houchen's side. After escaping danger, Cece was in a much better mood, looking at Long Houchen with a look full of curiosity. "Hello, sir. Thank you for saving my life." Cece bowed to Long Houchen. Her bearing looked no different from the continent's mags. Now far calmer than before, that irresistible beauty resembling Kia to some extent, and moreover no inferior to the latter in her looks, gave off the feeling of brimming with life. This was a great fit with Long Houchen's post-evolution light god domain, to the extent that she also got an immense boost from the domain. From Cece's previous intervention, Long Houchen could feel that she was a mage of the 8th step. Such a mage looking only around 20 in age would definitely be a genius among geniuses in the continent. "Hello. I just happened to be here at the right time. Why has this gorilla been after you?" Long Houchen asked confusedly. Hearing this question, Cece's eyes immediately revealed an expression of sadness, and teardrops fell uncontrollably. That tear-stained peerless beauty really made a touching sight. In front of Long Houchen's firm statement, she couldn't help but shake slightly, causing in him the unconscious reaction of not daring to look at her beautiful face. "That's a house pet of the devil. That devil which has killed my clansmen, seized my family, and is chasing me to kill me. If I hadn't encountered you, I'm afraid I would." Long Houchen asked in puzzlement, "Devil? What devil?" Cece took a deep breath, explaining in sadness, "A powerful mage. Practically none of us in Eastern can even stand in front of him. And he has an absolute authority in here, all the clans here have to listen to his orders. I had accidentally found a treasure, but he found out for some unknown reason. So he sent people to my clan, requesting it. But this treasure was able to change my clan's future, so our head refused categorically. A few days later, an army came to my homeland. Not even giving the chance for a compromise, they carried out a merciless slaughter. When escaping from there, I personally saw my father, mother, and brother getting seized by their people. As it turns out, this was a world called Eastern, an ocean of green nature in a human world. Mostly two races lived there, humans and fairies. This devil the young girl Cece was referring to was the Lord of Eastern, known as Eastern's King, a half-fairy with a mixed human and fairy bloodline. In control of extremely powerful nature magic, he was the greatest powerhouse of the world Eastern. Eastern's king was like this world's ruler, he had no army, but his standing was like a king of the forest. Any being going against his wishes would ultimately get killed. His life seemed without end, having already ruled over this world for over 3,000 years. The young girl Cece didn't tell what treasure she had obtained. Long Houchen discerned some precautions in her eyes. "How should we handle this gorilla?" Long Houchen asked Cece. Cece replied hesitantly, "That's the servant of Eastern's king, his faithful lackey. No one knows how many humans and fairies have already deceased by his hand. Our Noah clan is pacifistic and doesn't wish for confrontations. If only it could have just remained weak forever, at least there wouldn't be a need for paying lives." Long Houchen furrowed his eyebrows, giving it some thought. "Let me give a try." Saying so, he slowly lifted his right hand, silently feeling the surrounding light god domain. A soft multicolored radiance started to condense in his hand, filled with the power of life as it formed a small multicolored spiral in his hand. An expression of exhaustion appeared on Long Houchen's face, as he was not only concentrating his force, but moreover borrowing power from the deep mysteries of life. If not for his soul force having made great progress, there would be no way for him to accomplish that. In a flash of multicolored light, that small spiral got flying, and landed on that miniaturized gorilla. The multicolored spiral landed on the gorilla's head, and immediately turned into countless multicolored lights making their way into its body. The little gorilla stood unmoving with a blank face, its body filled up with multicolored glosses. What Long Houchen had declared he was having a try about was mainly about comprehension. After his cultivation had made such a qualitative leap, comprehending nothing was impossible given his level of understanding. Never look down on that multicolored spiral, that's his post-evolution domain's domain technique, an extraordinary life seal. Long Houchen didn't know how long this seal could last, but after it entered the gorilla's body, he found out that all its aura of life was assimilated by his seal. Should no one get rid of this seal within 7 days, it would make the life alteration of this gorilla permanent. In other words, really turn it back into an infant. Only by restarting from scratch would it gain the chance of reaching this boundary anew. Withdrawing the domain, although Long Houchen felt somewhat tired, the happiness in his eyes stood with no doubt. He had gained his second domain technique, and this domain technique was truly miraculous. In some meaning, it could determine a person's age, life, or death. To be in control of life, what kind of cheat was that? The young girl Cece couldn't help but stare at the scene in front of her eyes. Although she remained vigilant toward Long Houchen, his domain's power of nature and life had unwittingly raised some feelings of cordiality in her. It should be okay. I have sealed the growth trajectory of his life. His body has been restricted to this state and would only return to its original power after growing back. And that will be a long process. Thank you for your benevolence. May the lords of nature praise you. Cece gazed at Long Houchen and said very earnestly. Long Houchen seemed to want to say something as the emotionless voice from before once again sounded out within him. Second mission opened. Assist Cece in rescuing her family, and moreover, earn her trust and have her take the initiative of offering her treasure. Failure of the mission will cause the test to fail. Although Long Houchen was already thinking that rescuing Cece was just the start of the trial, after accepting the mission, he still couldn't help but be alarmed. Eastern's king that Cece had spoken about was absolutely the most terrifying existence of this plane. For one of his house pets to be so strong, how could the person himself reach such a degree of power? Even if he didn't reach a level such as the demon god emperors, at least he would be a match for the likes of the moon demon god or star demon god. Such a degree of strength was nothing the current Long Houchen could contend with, especially when he's unable to get Haoyu's assistance. Cece, what are your plans from now on? In the previous conversation they had exchanged names with each other. Cece's expression darkened, her cute face showing a helpless expression. I don't know either. That devil is just too powerful, my family. Saying so, she couldn't help but cry again. Long Houchen furrowed his brows and declared, stop crying for now. It won't solve anything. Tell me in detail, how many clans are there in Eastern? Among the lot, some are intimately related to Eastern's king, and some are enemies. Although I am thinking of assisting you, I'm still afraid our strength is not sufficient. Saying so, his thoughts only got even more serious. On one side, Long Houchen was standing as an onlooker, but on the other side, Cece had just witnessed his strength, particularly his control over life going through this mystical force. But even after seeing these, she still hadn't asked from him the favor of helping. This proved either that she didn't trust him, or that she didn't believe him to be a threat for Eastern's king. Long Houchen was more inclined to believe the latter. After all, he had already rescued her, and although they didn't have a deep contact with each other, his light god physique and the incomparable purity of his light, even if he couldn't gain Cece's complete trust, at least it wouldn't make her apprehensive. Cece silently shook her head. No. Because I have found that thing, I have already caused devastating damage to my clan. I won't give it to that devil, whom I want to destroy. Even at the cost of my life, at worst I will be joining my family's side. Seeing Cece's eyes gradually becoming filled with a resolute look, the first thing that came to Long Houchen's mind was not his own mission, but admiration for this young girl. She was not only kind-hearted, but also courageous. She may not be wise enough, but for such a beautiful girl to still have this kind of character meant she felt extremely attractive to any man. Long Houchen nodded lightly. I can comprehend that you are unwilling to implicate someone else. But that way, I'm afraid your family would hardly make it through alive. Cece replied in distress, perhaps, but that is fate. So long, you have saved my life, and I am unable to return the favor. This Cece was originally about to die. If you give in, I am willing to offer my clean self to you. This could be considered a repayment for the favor of saving my life. Anyway, this body will come clean again in my next life. Long Houchen jumped in start, his ears immediately reddening. If he was told this back when he was not very aware of matters between males and females, he wouldn't give it much thought. But just before taking the test, Kia and him had just crossed the line. That was the first time he had experienced that beautiful act. Cece was moreover such a beauty, her white clothing being completely insufficient to cover up her magnificent curves. When facing a beautiful woman, anyone would show some reaction. One could for instance show admiration, have dirty thoughts, or get awkward and embarrassed. That last was exactly Long Houchen's case. Cece, don't be like that. In front of Cece's expression of distress as she looked about to take him under her embrace, Long Houchen really felt somewhat at a loss. Grabbing her shoulders in his hands in a hurry, he forced her into a certain distance from him. Cece raised her head to look at Long Houchen, her eyes hazy with tears. "So Long, am I not to your liking, or are you afraid of getting involved with me? My body is really pure, and has never been in any man's hands." Hearing all she said, Long Houchen immediately felt his hands loosen as if electrocuted, as he forced a smile. "Listen to me, Cece. I just happened to be here to save you, and had no intention to get repaid in such a manner. Moreover, right because I happened to encounter such a matter, I was thinking of helping out. I may not be capable enough to contend against a powerful opponent such as Eastern's king, but I will still give it a try. If we are lucky enough, maybe your family can be saved. Even if we are unable to succeed, you mustn't renounce living so lightly. There is always a hope for the living, but nothing can be done for the dead." Cece silently nodded. "Thank you, Sir Long. I really don't know how I can thank you. As you have saved my life, you can have my body anytime you want." Long Houchen waved his hands repeatedly in embarrassment. "Don't be like that, Cece. Let's first think up a way to rescue your family. Where did you say Eastern's king lives? Are you able to draw out a map?" Cece nodded. "Yes." Immediately, she crouched in front of Long Houchen, drawing a detailed map using branches on the ground. Her drawing was pretty good, and as she drew she also told Long Houchen about the arrangements around Eastern's king's residence. Eastern's king doesn't have his own army, but wields a formidable power of nature. At least 10 magical beasts of that previous gorilla's grade serve as his house pets. If we want to break past them into his cave, then we must avoid its guards. My family is very possibly in the deepest part of this cave. Long Houchen calmly listened to her arrangements, continuously nodding, and engraving her words in his memories. Cece's body frequently let out a thin fragrance entering Long Houchen's nose, different from the fragrance emitted from Kia's body. The sweetness from Cece's body was imbued with the aura of life, just like a flower full of enticement, fresh and clean, elegant and magnificent. However, Long Houchen showed an unflustered attitude. Neither his eyes, nose, mouth, nor his heart paid any special attention to Cece. The map and arrangements are such. Cece revealed to Long Houchen a sweet smile, apparently having already suppressed her pain compared to before. When she smiled, she truly was a peerless beauty. Long Houchen gave it some thought. "I suggest scouting the area first, to search for some specific information. If there is a chance, I will be entering the cave to search for your relatives. Remain outside in a safe spot, ready to provide support." "How could that be okay? How could I leave you to take care of my matters all alone?" Cece shook her head firmly. "I will be entering with you. Back when my father was still alive, he had formerly taken me to Eastern's king's cave, so I'm more familiar than you with that place. And Sir Long, I disagree with your plan. By attempting to scout the area, it would be very possible to inadvertently alert the enemy. In case Eastern's king gets on guard, it will get even nearer to impossible for us to succeed. The king has a habit, he takes a nap every day at noon, and for about a duration of 1 hour. In this process, he will be in a very, very deep sleep, but will have his body protected with a divine tool. His house pets will be guarding him extremely closely at this time, but I believe that this will be our best chance. If we can avoid those house pets as we enter his cave, we will definitely be able to save my family." Hearing Cece's arrangement and analysis, Long Houchen's eyes flickered with surprise. "Looks like you already came prepared." The charming smile on Cece's face stiffened, letting out a light sigh, as she once again revealed some distress. "Ever since my homeland got destroyed, I have been incessantly thinking about rescuing my family, racking my brains on the issue. The method I have just spoken about should be the most feasible." Reaching this point, Cece suddenly kneeled in front of Long Houchen. Her movement being too sudden immediately gave Long Houchen a terrible start. The natural walking speed was not so fast, so it took another 15 minutes before they approached the foot of Eastern Mountain. Cece stopped walking and raised her head to look at the color of the sky. At that moment, Long Houchen happened to turn around and caught a glimpse of her long eyelashes blinking softly. His heart couldn't help but admire Cece's beauty once again. The Eastern's king is about to take a nap. "Brother Long, I'm counting on you. I must go to ignite the panacea." As she was speaking, she raised the clove up and lit it carefully with a firelighter from her bosom. Suddenly, a faint smoke floated up. Cece quickly released a curtain of water that enveloped the burning clove instead of letting the smoke spread. In an instant, the smoke combined with the water curtain, which soon gave off a strange pale pink color. The clove was burning in a swift manner, which then turned to dust in a blink of an eye. But the water curtain in Cece's hand had already become fascinating pink. Wrist twisted as Cece kept muttering endless incantation again and again. The pink curtain of water immediately started to coagulate, and, in a moment, it utterly turned into dozens of long and sized pink ice pellets, as beautiful as a precious gemstone. Cece gave a charming smile to Long Houchen, then said, "The only way to store the power of the panacea is, after we enter the holy mountain, we must ignite these ice pellets. Once the fog erupts, its effect will be actuated. We can now go up the mountain by going continuously upward from here. Brother Long, we have to be a little faster." Long Houchen glanced at Cece as she set her spirit wings free once again. Then he did the same. As the two of them were flying upward along the side of the mountain, Cece kept tossing a pellet towards a different direction. Just like what she said before, the ice pellets burst as soon as they flew out and drifted away in a pink mist toward the distance. Along the way, they did not encounter any cut-off, just as what they expected. However, soon after, their eyes got caught by an enormous cave that appeared ahead of them. Long Houchen immediately felt for formidable presences at the entrance of the cave. Cece went to Long Houchen's side to give him a sign gesture to slow down, but, at the same time, one ice pellet slipped off and burst in the sky. The ice mist crept towards the cave mouth. Soon, those four formidable presents abated. Long Houchen's heart was secretly taken aback. The clove is indeed very powerful. The Eastern's King Cave must be guarded by 9 orders of angels. If not because of the rhizome inside my mouth, I'm not sure if the power of light could exempt from its poisonousness. Floated up and down, they both landed at the entrance of the cave. There was a flicker of excitement in Cece's eyes. There were 4 huge bodies lying on the ground, and they looked exactly like the gorillas Long Houchen saw before. Even with those senseless limbs lying on the ground, their huge bodies still seemed as incredibly powerful. They were just sleeping soundly. Long Houchen seemingly had some doubts in his mind. Cece smiled and said, "Brother Long, don't worry. As powerful as the clove intoxication is, it is not going to be effective within the domain of person with strong character. If not, I would not be able to use it directly to save my family, would I? Let's head inside before it's too late." Eastern's King Cave was extremely vast. As they advanced deep into the cave, the strong atmosphere became denser, filled with great vitality. Long Houchen felt goosebumps throughout his entire body. He took a deep breath as his spirit raised at an astonishing rate inside his body. It was enough for him to keep up. Life force can also enhance the psychic power? Long Houchen finally understood fully, as this could not have happened in the past. It must be the result of the success of his training from rank 9 of second orders to rank 3. Cece waved to Long Houchen with her spirit wings still remained freely before she sped into the depths of the cave. This cave was a work of God. Only after entering the cave could one get the idea how huge it was. There was an exceedingly extensive space inside, as if half of the mountain had been emptied. Long Houchen and Cece were flying inside the cave as if they were little insects within this vast cave with no trace of any other livings. To think that this shape and form were created naturally was all the more impressive. There was no time to appreciate the magic view inside the cave. Soon, they entered halfway up the mountain. At that very moment, an unusual sound hit Long Houchen's ears. Long Houchen's expression became strange once he heard the deafening snores. "What's this?" Cece nodded and whispered, "Eastern's king is asleep. This is his snoring. We should get out of here quickly." Long Houchen had a small laugh. Did it mean that the grunts of that volume and power were surely to be loud? This half of the mountain was the widest part of the cave. Cece took a slight peek before she led Long Houchen to where a boulder was lying in front of a narrow passageway that seemed like a perfect path to go further into the cave. The size of this passage was just enough to fit a person, and with a boulder lying ahead of it. It would have been easily missed if Cece did not get so close to the passage. "Brother Long, this should lead us to the back of the cave, where my family is being held." Cece stopped and looked at Long Houchen as if she wanted to say something but hesitated to. Long Houchen said, "You should go rescue your family. I'll stand on guard right here, in case Eastern's king woke up, so I can keep him distracted." Cece nibbled her red lips as she profoundly stared at Long Houchen before she darted into his bosom and hugged him tightly. Long Houchen was caught off guard by her embrace. "Brother Long, after I rescue my family successfully, I will become your maidservant to look after you your entire life." Once she finished her sentence, she let go of her arms and dashed off into the cave. Long Houchen lifted his right hand and gave her receding figure a gentle pat. A small whirlpool of colors came pouring inside Cece's body all at once. Cece suddenly felt more powerful spiritually. She couldn't help but feel grateful and turned around to take a glimpse at Long Houchen. Be careful. Long Houchen nodded to her. Cece also nodded gently before she began speeding up again and disappeared as she reached the corner of the tunnel. Long Houchen jumped into the air to reach the front of the boulder, and at this exact moment, the sound of Easton's king purring suddenly stopped. Who dares to enter the king's forbidden land? The thick and sonorous voice was the same as the grunt before. His voice rang out like thunder in the middle of a huge hill more than 300 meters high. There was a flash of light in Long Houchen's eyes, his chest, his heartbeat was vigorously fluctuated. The evolution of the light god domain allowed him to directly convert life form from the outside world into his own spiritual powers. As the presence of these life forms entered his body, countless spots of green rays, unexpectedly, appeared within his body, which, indeed, was very bizarre. The power of terror instantly surged in from all directions, as well as the golden light that spread throughout his body. In front of someone who was strong and capable like Easton's king, how could he fail to put his domain in a good use? The domain of dark green light arrived first before the man. The color of Easton's king domain was very special. That dark green was so bright yet so dignified at the same time. The extremely intense presence came from the purest color of Long Houchen's achievement of light attribution. Green and colorful golden light collided together. A strange scene appeared. Between two fields, there was no collision of mutual invasion. The 7 colors of the golden light were distinctly at the superior position. Unexpectedly, after touching the domain of green light, golden light raised at full speed and became even more dazzling. In the blink of an eye, the domain grew by more than a third. That resonating voice seemed uncertain. Immediately, Long Houchen became dumbstruck when he caught sight of a figure appearing in the middle of the domain of green light. Meanwhile, that dark green domain shrank back to maintain a distance from the light god domain. Long Houchen wouldn't be surprised if Easton's king's body was incomparably enormous, even surpassed the gorillas outside. That was because Cece was so scared of him. But the king of Easton, his figure is too short and small. Is he about 5 feet tall? Well, that's about it. He wouldn't be able to reach the height of Long Houchen's chest even if he was standing in front of Long Houchen. Easton's king had short, bushy, and curly brown hair, and on top of that, it was all over the top of his head. Dressed in jade-cut armor that was shining brilliantly. Although his stature was relatively short and small, his body was extremely robust. His shoulder width was at least 2/3 of his height. His eyes and nose could be seen clearly. Easton's king's face was bright red, as if he had rosacea. He had brown eyes just like his hair. He was holding a huge axe as big as his body in his left hand and a huge hammer in his right hand. With his stocky torso, he was holding a huge pair of dark green weapons that seemed rather odd. Such fine weapons. Although the 2 weapons and Easton's king's armor were green, Long Houchen immediately concluded that the 3 items were artifact grade in existence. The color could be different, but the presence could not be wrong. Just the sheer presence of it had already turned the entire cave green. Although the Easton's king's presence was powerful, it did not exert much pressure on Long Houchen. The scope of light was contracting within 30 meters of Long Houchen. Any ray of green that surpassed this range would immediately become part of the light god domain. Long Houchen had just completed his ascent, and with his brief preoccupation with Easton's king's domain, he felt stronger than ever. But his heart was still beating endlessly as if it was recovering its spiritual strength. Human, why did you enter my domain? Easton's king's voice was still, inversely proportional to his size, deafening. Long Houchen answered, Easton's king, to fulfill your selfish desire, you bullied others and even committed genocide. Today is your day to pay back the debts. As he spoke, his 2 hands were joining together on the top of his head. The aria of the goddess of light merged with blue rain and hibiscus of light. The radiant of the 7 colors rose instantly and the god of light domain rippled outwards like water. Nonsense! Easton's king shouted as he brandished his axe and hammer around, and suddenly his green domain burst forth in the air, all at once, in a myriad of plant forms towards the domain of light. How did this happen? Said Easton's king, astounded. Restrained his domain hastily as he pounced on straight towards Long Houchen. A complete domain restraint was extremely rare and would only occur where 2 of the domains were at their peaks. And the domain of Long Houchen and Easton's king were more than just mere forbearance. Easton's king's domain was the closest upon the best fuel for Long Houchen's domain, and for a moment, Long Houchen's domain was a little stronger than he could control. With the confrontation of Eastern's king's attack, Long Houchen was not afraid at all. He took out his sword of life and creation with both hands to behead. The beheading might not be of the original as of right now, not only the mixed strength of Long Houchen's domain but also the understanding of the meaning of the sword, the soul of the sword. Just by looking at the practice altogether, seemingly as if the 7 colors of the golden of the light in the sky, the whole mountain, all hovered around the spirit of killing. At this moment, Long Houchen exuded an unprecedented majesty. Eastern's king's green domain weakened and melted as it came into contact with the golden light of Long Houchen's sword. Even a pair of the most powerful weapons in his hand were greatly affected. But Eastern's king, whose spiritual strength was far higher than that of Long's, let out a loud cry as his 2 arms parted. Suddenly, Long Houchen's sword was torn into pieces by a tremendous force. At the same time, as the king moved closer, he struck his axe right against Long Houchen's sword of life and creation. At this point, Long Houchen could feel nothing but surprise. It had never occurred to him that the power of one person or any creature could be this frightening. Even the king of devils could never possess such power. Only the little touch of the edge of the sword. The next moment, Long Houchen's entire body already flew right off like a cannonball and hit the distant wall. As hard as the wall inside the mountain was, with the green debris that scattered when Long Houchen's body hit the wall, it made a big hole. With Long Houchen's 9 orders of rank 3 and his ability to suppress both the enemy's domain and sword, if they were to confront, this would be the result of Eastern's king's power. Long Houchen's heart was beating vigorously and endlessly. He couldn't help but sweep out a mouthful of blood. He felt as if he got ran over by a boulder and every part of his body hurt, especially in his arms. He felt as if they weren't his own. The sword of life and creation completely split into 2 epis after an instant contact. There were fine cracks all over the swords as if they were breaking apart. Even though Long Houchen's body was recovering quickly, how can such a battle continue? No wonder. No wonder even his pet was so powerful. No wonder he was so short and yet grunting. It appeared to Long Houchen that Eastern's king was the most frightening of them all. Eastern's king cried with his triumphant voice, "Aha! This king has the blood of King of Titans. A fight on strength, even the gods would come to me in submission." Meanwhile, a strong golden light drifted out from the hole where Long Houchen was. The color of the golden light became even more powerful compared to before. Followed by a strange trajectory with a slight hum, the 7 colors flew rapidly in rotation. The next moment, Long Houchen was back in the air. Long Houchen took a deep breath before he looked fixedly at Eastern's king and said, "I couldn't be a match with you by strength. So I'll use the domain this time." At once, Long Houchen transformed to the sunlight shape. All the colors of the golden light were shining from every aspect of the mountain. Eastern's king, despite his tremendous power, was completely repressed in his attributes by Long Houchen. Once the golden light fell upon him, he knew immediately that his power was being drawn with prodigious speed. At the same time, he could not use his domain, as it would only speed up his cultivation to be swallowed by the domain of light. Only by attacking the enemy that he could be saved, and only by defeating Long Houchen that he could remove this threat from the domain of light. Eastern's king roared before his hammer flew out of his hand into midair like a meteor. Long Houchen gave him a dry smile. "In this power competition, even if granted with all kinds, I still would not be your components. However, your domain is completely suppressed by me and no domain would weaken or counterbalance it. No matter how strong you are, that's it without the domain." The great hammer flew past him as he was speaking, but only light and shadow were broken. Before the hammer clashed into the wall, it curved right back into the hands of Eastern's king. All he could see in the cave was the colors of the golden light. The domain of the god of light showed him the world with only colors. The cave seemed to have disappeared as everything he saw became colorful. Exactly as Long Houchen said, there was no domain in confrontation. Mere strength could not stand half a chance against a strong domain. Just the dominance of his domain alone made him powerful. Eastern's king did not speak a word, but only his brown eyes shining brightly. While holding a pair of weapons by his side, he was in a position of perceiving Long Houchen. He soon found out that it was nothing. All he perceived from Long Houchen's domain is light. Not a single breath of the soul. Long Houchen remained hidden inside the domain of light as he quickly recovering his body and using his brain. If it weren't for the domain's absolute restraint, even the strongest man in the land of the spirit, the holy knight, Yang Haoyu, would not be Eastern's king's opponent. His power is indeed tremendous. The life presence is even purer in his domain. Also, because of the evolution of Long Houchen's domain of light, there was the ability to control the course of life, which had the effect of the fusion of life breath. Otherwise, he would have no other choice but to flee. Affected the domain of light, his spiritual strength reduced greatly. Even if he was physically strong, without the support of the spiritual strength, he could only grind Long Houchen bit by bit. Eastern's king's eyes were full of reluctance. With a battle so badly fought, it had never occurred to him that his domain could be in control by another's domain like this. His domain possessed a powerful ability to control all vitality of all animals and plants. Once inside his domain, the enemy's vitality will be drained rapidly along with his super strength. No one in the land of Eastern had ever threatened him. But today, he came across a huge mess with the domain of the God of Life that he had always been so proud of, fighting against Long Houchen's advanced domain of the God of Light like a dry firewood that meet fire, and then the firewood, which was him, was burned. Eastern's king let out another roar. His presence burst forth, and the domain of life that previously went hidden bloomed again. Although this was just like drinking poison to quench thirst, only this way that the two domains would collide and show him Long Houchen's whereabouts. In a flash, Eastern's king shoot out with top, while his two weapons flew out of his hands into the air, covering the ground, towards Long Houchen. Only the two weapons that were flying toward Long Houchen could be seen, but on the verge of clashing, they turned a corner and collided with one another, caused a terrifying roar. A layer of intense emerald lightning scattered, covering at least 300 square meters. Ha ha! You have no place to hide now. You are hit by my great thunder. Even if your domain can restrain me, you will be in shock and soon be paralyzed. Ye. At this point, Eastern's king realized something went wrong. For he found that Long Houchen's shadow had vanished and the domain of light was rapidly merging with his domain of life. No, this cannot be. Eastern's king, full of confusion, caught the two artifact weapons flying back to him. This video will end here.